Welcome to this week's episode of Chewing the Crust with me, the pie-eating man. This episode is one that I am really looking forward to. I'm chatting with Paul Cooper, who is an actor, a writer, a campaigner, and one of life's genuine good eggs. Now, some of you may know his face, although it's perhaps a bit cleaner and more educated looking, as Martin Mucklowe from the award-winning, BAFTA award-winning BBC series This Country. But what you might not know is that Paul landed his first acting role at the age of 60. And he did it alongside his children, Daisy May and Charlie, who both went on to win BAFTAs for the show as well. That's right, the Coopers are a full-on creative powerhouse. And having seen some bits about you, Martin, I think you... Paul, I think you might be behind that. But there's lots more to your stories than TV, and really that's a tiny, tiny part of your life. So before acting, you spent 20 years helping people with hoarding and the hoarding behaviours. You're also part of the Children's Football Alliance, spreading the message of peace, which is massively important. I think it's really important to remind children and adults to play. And then you've survived a heart attack, traveled across the globe, and then you've still found time within a couple of days to speak with me, and hopefully we can have a laugh and a chat as well. So you are one of life's late bloomers, would you say?
I guess so, Martin. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Yeah, everything late, better now than never, I don't quite know what I did for the first 60 years. Just kind of floating around.
Even that overlaps a little bit with me, because I think you worked in recruitment, didn't you?
Yeah, I worked in recruitment. I was terrible at that. That gave me the heart attack. And I worked at a school as well, a couple of decades in sales, and I'm the worst salesman of all time. But,
that was the thing I hated about recruitment, sales and recruitment. It was just soulless and backstabbing and awful. I hated every second of it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the people were nice, but my God, yeah, it was tough. Long hours. I can't handle chasing targets. I don't mind working in, people's homes and even when it's filthy and verminous. Yeah, anything with a money target. I'm terrible. Absolutely useless.
No, I agree. I think the target for me, and I get the feeling similarly from you, it's about the heart. It's about helping people or giving some people a product that if I'm selling a product that I think is actually genuinely good, no one could sell it better than me. And if I think it's right for the person, but I can't sell things to people that they don't need or want, and that just hurts to me.
Yes, yeah.
Well, before we go any further, what you won't know if you haven't seen many of my podcasts is that every guest who comes on the podcast gets a little poem. So hold on to your underpants, because you will never hear a poem. It's actually Late Blooming Star is the title. So let's go. He grew up wild in Devon air, a childhood spent without a care. Football, a bike, a fishing line, simpler days, a simpler time. A dad, a granddad, steady and kind, helping others clear their mind. From clutter to comedy, laughter to tears, a heart that's travelled across the years. Proof that dreams don't come with age, you can still find light on a brand new stage. So here's Paul, the man who shows you're never too old to chase those goals. Welcome
Brilliant.
to the
You're wasted, Mark. Yeah. Poet laureate, I think, next stop for you.
Yeah, maybe not, but hopefully it puts a smile on somebody's face.
Very good.
So, I mean, when our mutual friend first introduced us, I basically what happened was I work in a similar industry related to the hoarding that you work in. And there's a lady who I work with who I find incredibly interested. She's an expert in hoarding, and I deal with some elements of that in my work. And her knowledge is just vast and intrigues me because of the subject matter. It's an interesting subject matter anyway. And I just said to her, do you think there's anyone from your organization that would be interested in having a chat? She put a thing on the group chat and said, anybody interested? You came up, said, oh, by the way, he does a bit of acting. And then I searched for you. And not only, obviously, you do a bit more than just a bit of acting, but you've done everything. So, like, we've booked this slot to have a chat, but I can't believe we're going to have time to talk about all sorts of things and all sorts of life pivots, which is what the podcast is about, that you've been through.
Yeah, I think the theme is Jack of all trades, master of none. Mark. I'll have a go at everything, but...
Well, probably the first thing I like to talk to guests about, because I think it gives a really good grounding to who you are and about you, is I usually ask you to describe your childhood, and yours sounds very enviable. So tell me about the young you.
Yeah, so I was born in North Devon, 1957. God, that sounds a long time ago. So I grew up there, and we left as I left in 71. So they were great years, and it's very much, the kind of where children were just out playing all the time, given a lot of responsibility, very few adults really in my life, because you played all day, I mean, those were the days when, at primary school, you could go into town at lunchtime alone, and I went to the fish, we all used to go to the fish and chip shop, get some chips. And wow, so it was like free range play. So we did everything really, rode our bikes, football, as well as the kind of street park football. We also organized our own team. So we were about 9-10, and England had just won the World Cup. And, we formed our own football team. So we found a piece of grass, a kind of pitch at the bottom of someone's garden. And, we built goalposts. We even did a bit of sewing, because there was no kind of football kit really around those times. And to make money, my mum had some chocolate liqueurs for Christmas, which she didn't like. So we, got some raffle tickets and knocked on people's doors in the town. And I think those liqueurs lasted for 3 years. We never declared a winner. And to get a game, we would go on our bikes on a Saturday, or if it's a holiday time, and we'd go to villages. And if we saw someone kicking a ball, we'd say, can you get a team together and we'll come and play you next Saturday at 2:00. And that's how we formed this thing. There was no everything was just being children, and going. We go to the seaside. We're fairly near Westward Ho. So it was kind of idyllic really. As long as you were home in time for tea, that was about the only kind of, and no one seemed to be particularly worried. I mean, we, and you were used to seeing children out. Now you don't see children. Everyone on a bicycle or running is an adult. And some American, I can't remember his name, said, we've had 40,000 generations who've learnt about life by going out, making their own games up and playing, and organizing it and ruling it. And then, one or two, probably one generation or whatever hasn't, maybe 2 generations now. And on the football front, we think we're so sophisticated now with academies and taking children at 5, this, that, and the other. The only time we won the World Cup was in 1966. And Bobby Charlton said about that fine win, and he's very much, he was very much part of the establishment. He didn't want rock boat, said the 1966 World Cup was not won on the playing fields of England. It was won on the streets. And basically is what he's talking about is a game that was organized, controlled, and played by kids. That wasn't, you played school football, and you wouldn't go to a professional club till you're about about 16. I mean, it's totally different times, and I must say, I think it's a tough time for kids because they get very few opportunities to play out.
I don't think. I certainly don't think the young people now, but I think a lot of people have overlooked the loss of a wide variety of skills that you gained from living that lifestyle. Because I was lucky enough to live a similar lifestyle. I mean, I'm probably a generation or two younger than you, but it involved going in the fields and building sheds. And when your mum said you could only go this far on your bike, you went further, and nobody knew, nobody was there to check, and it was almost a license to push boundaries, and even down to people knocking you down a peg or two, or having a bit of fear of the bigger boys, or knowing which areas you needed to avoid, and it all sounds like risk, but yeah, there's risk in everything we do, and in order to be able to learn to manage risk, you have to know how to manage risk, and that's all been removed.
Yeah.
Scary, really.
Yeah, crossing the roads and everything. And I think the creativity side of it, and I'll just give you one analogy, and I'll give you a football analogy, is if you're Messi and the ball just bounces nicely for you, you're going to strike it and it's going to go right up in the top corner of the net. You have to be a lot more skillful when it's kids football in the park and you're playing, because it's jumpers for goalposts. So if you put it in where Messi puts it, their team would go too wide, too high. So you had to bring it in a bit, bring it down a bit, and also you had to hit it so it just brushed the goalkeeper's glove, because if it went too far, he'd say, go on, I'm not getting that, you get it. And by praising him, you were so unlucky there, then he'd stay in goal because you didn't want to go in goal. So just those things, you're being a diplomat, a sportsman, just all rolled in with that one. It's not just about whacking that ball. You've got to take into many more considerations, and that's
even
just
physics,
one tiny example.
The ball usually had about 3 patches on it because you played with it that much. It was down to like the canvas underneath, and you would have to strike it in the certain way because it probably wasn't very well pumped up, or the one that you had today is, and the one that you had yesterday was pumped up differently, and the one that Mike brings tomorrow is going to be pumped. It might be totally flat. We'd play with sticks when we didn't have a ball, and then you have to be able to calculate without any sort of understanding what angle you've got to hit it at in order to get the bounce right. All of the, I mean, I used to run a bushcraft business for a short while, and I used to take young families into the woods, and because that's what I did, and I was worried that families didn't have that opportunity. So I'd take them into the woods, teach them to light fires and build shelters. And people would say, you're giving them knives. And I said, well, if you don't give them a knife, they don't know how not to use a knife, and they don't understand it's a tool and not a weapon. And if you teach them to light a fire, I mean, there's not many children could light a match now. But if you don't know how to light a match and to hold it up rather than down, you burn your fingers, you drop the match, you burn the house down. So these are skills, and people might not think of them as a skill, but they are. Even just understanding that the more weight that you put on a den, the stronger you make it, because the physics is holding it in place, and it's all learned that we don't even realize we learned.
Yeah, no, right. Absolutely. And I don't remember when I've seen the last kid climbing a tree, I mean, we fell out of them, we broke our wrists or whatever. But I mean, that was part of it, I mean, that was learning, it's, I always remember seeing on Esther Ransom program, this is way back, and I think it was a child who got badly injured at a playground, which is very sad, or even may have lost their life. So then there's this huge thing about making playgrounds safer. and the flooring and stuff like that. But what they found was that kids had to travel further, and also when it was kind of concrete, you had to, as you said, you had to take responsibility for your safety. And when it's the kind of smoother kind of, less, the surface isn't as hard, you're kind of falling. And then, so it's just that thing that, you just trust kids to sort it out themselves and make those decisions, whether they can or not, whether it's safe or not.
I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that kids are all born geniuses and it's us that knock that out of them rather than the other way around. And I totally buy into that. I remember one of my greatest achievements was we used to go to this girls' school where we weren't allowed and we'd get chased off by the security guards, but they had hockey pitches and we used to play football on these hockey pitches. And they had these massive, great trees and they used to leave all the crash mats out from their games. And they had, there was the high jump ones that were much thicker than the other ones.
Yeah.
They had one of those under the tree, and we used to just climb the tree and jump out of it onto the mat. Well, one of my proudest moments was climbing to the highest branch anyone had ever jumped from, but missing the mat. But I was fine, Again, you learn how your body should drop and all of those things, but just mental. But I presume this, we're sort of fast tracking a little bit, but I presume this is where your program for changing and involving, because you've had a couple of football sort of movements, really, haven't you?
Yeah, the first one was, because I never had a coach. I never played, my nearest level was just, local football, local leagues. I wasn't particularly good. So when my son wanted to start playing, things had changed. Schools football, the PE teachers didn't want to kind of go after school. They weren't being paid for it. And it became little clubs, so it was right at the forefront. And I, along with three others, my son was 5. we started Cirencester Town Juniors. There was the adult section was booming. But yeah, it wasn't children's football. Children's football, when they're in control, if one team's winning 5-0, you stop and you change the teams around because it wasn't competitive enough. But I remember in the early days of, kind of mini soccer, what have they called it? I was watching one game and one team was winning 27-0. And I said to the coach, wouldn't this be a good idea that we can stop your league game now and then you mix up the two teams because that, and let them play, because that will be educational. They'll be playing with different people. They've got to communicate. There's a real learning thing. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that because this will be very useful goal difference at the end of the season. And it's not the children's game. You don't have substitutes in the children's game. Everyone plays, whether it's 5 aside, 10 versus 9, 20 aside. That was the way forward. But parents kind of, was hijacked really. And the children, I think, missed out and, often win at all costs, but that's not about development, getting bigger kids or, whatever. So I think it's, for the difference, I think that, that was why I started a campaign and it was called Give Us Back Our Game, trying that kids referee themselves and things like that. And it had a massive impact. I was doing it with an American guy, Rick Fenolio, who was doing sport at lecture in sport at Manchester Metropolitan, and was very involved in a pilot program that Manchester United were doing with their under-9s, where they had different games that brought out different skills and no referees. So they used that for when other teams of that age come. Everyone else was doing an 8v8. Which has its place. But I just thought it was more about, not shouting so the kids could just make up, their own, they could express themselves, a lot more. And it's too rigid. And even in the professional, I just think football's become robotic. I think other sports are going along that line. And it's becoming middle class, it's no longer, you can, get off the estate by being a good footballer or in a good band. Things have completely changed. You go and study for 3 years how to write a song. Imagine, the Sex Pistols doing that, and I think people, and I've seen it with my own daughter. I mean, I always think Daisy's a bit like Gaza. You can't train them. You can ruin them, but you can't train them. And I don't think Paul Gascoigne would allow him in an academy. And I think he'd be heartbroken, because he wouldn't be able to express everything. But I could weep, for kids nowadays, and not getting the opportunities, outside play.
It always makes me wonder how many Gazas are missed as well. How many daisies are missed, or through that sort of linear rigidity. It's funny, I was listening to a documentary only earlier on with Bob Mortimer talking to somebody, and he was saying how, it's 30 years or so since he sort of broke onto the scene, and he was saying it just couldn't happen the way it happened for us anymore. And I think back then people said that, about the likes of Morecambe and Wise or whoever it was, but I think it just gets more concentrated. And I'm someone with ADHD, and I always say this, it comes up all the time, and I'm borderline sick of hearing myself say it, never mind anybody else. But it's my superpower. It's not something that holds me back. It's not the only thing that the reason it's held me back is because people have told me as I've grown up, don't do this, don't do that. So I've had to train myself as to what's acceptable and what isn't. But it's the thing that gets me through certain doors. It's the thing that, like my book, I've got it in front of certain people who hopefully might come on the podcast or in because my mum always taught me, you don't ask, you don't get. And but that ADHD, if somebody says to me, you're not going over there, I will go over there.
Yeah.
I'll go over there out of badness, and I think that whether that's ADHD or not, I don't know. It's the only thing I can put it down to. But it saddens me that we beige everything, and that includes personalities, and it includes momentum, and it includes enthusiasm, and that saddens me. And as you've said, I think the only people now who are not made to beige are the middle classes and the public school attendants, and it's almost like they've seen that in the working classes, stolen it, and taken it away from the working classes.
Absolutely. And it's all about money. If you want your child to be a professional footballer, you have to drive him long distances, and you've got to have money for boots, and you've got to have, it's, people can't afford it, and that's a huge difference. Look at the car parking when academy games are going on. They're all posh, and yeah, so I think it's really difficult. And as I said before, in music, you now, it's not like the Beatles or Oasis or whatever, and they had the opportunity just to play in a church hall or whatever, or in their bedroom, and they had the time, on the dole probably, but now you go to, like a friend of mine who's very talented, but he's the one in Bristol, BBM or BBI, I don't know what it is. It's a 3-year course on songwriting. Don't put the middle 8 there. Imagine, the Sex Pistols going there, and what's it? That's quite a nice. Let's just. And of course, the people, rather like the drama school, and Daisy had a horrendous time at RADA, which is meant to be the best. because they try and change you, and there was other things going on there. Yeah, but it's too coached. It's too manufactured, and it just knocks all the creativity out. It's just, you need that environment, to be able to grow, and there's always people there, either failed footballers who are coaches or failed musicians who are teaching you how to write a song. Well, they're probably not the best people to do it. I think the kids should be just given, well, there's some instruments. We'll see you in 10 years, or a couple of years.
Yeah, see if you can invent punk.
Yes, exactly.
But even that, if you look back to when the 90s, as you're referring to, was kind of those creativity stuff. I'm not saying that there's no creativity now, but it's few and far between. There's not many and most of it comes through Instagram or something of that ilk. That's the direct to market access now, isn't it? But music, when you listen to music between the 80s and the late 90s, it changed dramatically. But from the late 90s to now, I don't know if it's me getting old, it doesn't feel very different.
Yeah. And I think the youth culture, and of course, I mean, growing up in the 60s and 70s, things changed almost weekly, and there was no internet, no phone. How on earth did that happen? And, so in music, my first record, single I bought, 1963, I was 6, was the Beatles. And then it was the Stones, and then it, suddenly, mid 60s, the hair is longer, late 60s, it's, longer still. And there's, the songs have gone longer, and there's rock operas, and it's album based. And, and then it changes during the 70s every year. And then punk comes along. And first it was pub rock and kind of the Dr. Feelgood goods and things like that. Then it went into punk, which was huge, massive. Then it went into kind of mod type, the Jam type thing, and Rude Boys, and so it wasn't just the music. Every almost 6 months, clothing was changing or hairstyles. And then we went into the 80s, the New Romantics. And even the football hooligans, even the football and the kind of casual movement, that was so much about clothes, as much about clothes as it was fighting. And that changed weekly. So you'd be, I know my mate was in Portsmouth, the 657 crew. And, he said, the word went round, it's kind of Barber and the green type, welly type thing. This weekend away at Wrexham, and he said there were people with full barber gear, whether it was nicked or whatever, and people had fishing rods and creels. So this kind of ends with all these people with look like gone fishing program, and then the next week it would be something different. So the creativity and trying to get that message round, and and suddenly fans from another team would come along, and you go, oh no, look, they're so much more fashionable. We were wearing, and just those things kind of beat with the fashion. But how did it happen? Because there was, we used, and that was the thing, everything is instant. And, waiting for the melody maker to come out on the Friday or the NME was kind of, because that's where you got your information from. And they were creative times, so creative.
But I worked in a newsagents, and I loved all of that. And I mean, newsagents don't really, they do exist, but they don't exist for what they used to exist for. But my dad's from Manchester, and my family where I grew up are in Hull. And he used to travel to London in the sort of 60s and 70s. And he used to tell me that he'd go to London and he would try and dress in what they were wearing in London because they were 6 months ahead of Manchester. And then when he came to Manchester, he would visit Hull and they were 6 months behind Manchester. So he, fashion-wise, was like a year ahead of everyone in Hull. Like he was a space alien almost. But, that just doesn't happen. It can't happen. The world has just got smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. And as you say, that we're just catering for, we're sort of that mass market in every single thing we do. And I think the whole thing that we deal with it has gone that way. You know, it's just been stolen or made inaccessible. But identity was massive as well. And like you're saying, you know, that everybody looks the same. Everybody's lips are
Yeah.
ridiculous and, you know, all of that stuff. So very difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult to get away, wasn't it? Because you say you were dressed up as a mod, or I was in a band in the 70s from 75 to 81. And I remember we played at Hammersmith Broadway. So we were in the basement and we had a lot of mod followers. And upstairs was a skinhead disco. And they all came out at 11 o'clock. And
that was fun.
And you couldn't really hide because you wore this uniform, you know. And that's it, you know. I mean, they were, it was quite a violent era. But yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, you kind of wore these uniforms.
But even music, you know, I used to, I'm of the CD generation, but you would buy a CD or an LP and you would listen to it back to front, of front to back, over and over and over again until you knew every word. And even now, when a song finishes, you know what the next song would have been because you start to sing the next song because you've heard it so many times, but it's something else. But on a phone now, because everybody consumes their music by phone, you never get the full album. People just buy, and you never get them in the order that they were intended. So you don't even get that association with your band. You know, you can't. I know people still follow a band, but it's not. It can't be the same because you just that relationship you had with one album was really special.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it was good building resilience, going for an album and the 8 songs that you don't like on them and going through those as a kind of actor. Yeah, everything is so, you know, and it's actually become boring, you know, when it's every single song you really like. And I'm kind of, oh, where are the naff songs? I want a bit of that, you know.
But the other thing is, the ones you like the best were usually the ones you didn't like at first. The ones that actually you really fell in love with, you didn't probably like the first 3 times you heard them.
Yeah, and the people who wrote it, you know, it was a particular time for them rather than just a greatest hits type thing. So it had a bit of a kind of life and a bit of a story behind it, you know, where they were in their life. Yeah, and when I was the, you know, LP kind of age, so just the notes and whatever, and going in and buying it for the first time, you know, going to the record shop, you know, it was a real work rather than just cherry picking everything and just, you know.
And money was finite as well, so you had 10 quid in your pocket and an album was 10 quid and you wouldn't have another 10 quid for 6 weeks. So you had to pick the right one. You know, you had to sit and look through them and perhaps listen to them in the shop, and that mattered. Whereas now it's far more disposable, and I'll just have 3 of them, and you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you'd read, you know, I'd Melody Maker Sounds and NME when I was, and to see the reviews on the, you know, particular albums or whatever. It's, before you make your mind up, you know, and maybe there's 3 albums and you can only buy one, and which one. And I loved reading the music newspapers because that's, you know, the only media that you know that you could get. You know, the writing in it was, you know, tremendous. A lot of people have gone on and been successful writers. Now, you know, I think they're all online now. You know, the I know the NME when it was still at about 3 pages. You know, there's nothing. You know, it was a couple of lines. But the writing was as good as the band were. You know, you read sometimes and you didn't particularly like the band, but wow, the writing about them and, you know, following them on a tour and things like that was, it was great, you know. And then you look in the back of the classifieds because you needed a new drummer, you know, and you'd
but then you'd get used to that reporter because you'd know that they like the things after a while that you were liking, so you'd follow that person because you think, oh yeah, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So we've kind of done a little bit of this, but you did write a book which kind of encompassed a lot of this, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. Chapped legs and punctured balls. It didn't do very well, probably because of the title. But I remember the publisher saying the Fast Show had copyrighted Jumpers for Goalposts.
Jumpers for
We couldn't use
Goalposts.
it. And I'm thinking, really? So thank you, Fast Show. So I think the title just put it off. Yeah. So it was about, it was about just growing up, playing street football and stuff we wore, to play football in and stuff. And then things around it. And I interviewed lots of kind of people about how they played football and other games. And both professional and, kids and stuff. And I interviewed like Sir Tom Finney, who played for Preston North End. And it's my grandmother, her family were the founder members at Preston North End. So he played there still as a plumber, played for England with Stanley Matthews on one wing and him on the other wing. Wow. And I said, well, what about your? He said, well, we used to play in Moore Park, which is next to the ground. He said, we could be playing 20 aside. And he said, and when you play 20 aside, you never really see the ball. So you just keep hold of it as an individual for as long as you can. And he said, people getting so fed up, my own teammates. So it was like 39 versus 1. But of course, that made him a world-class dribbler. And I don't think those environments now kind of exist,
No, I don't think they do.
So it's that kind of creativity and stuff like some of the fascinating things about, they couldn't afford a football. It was a tennis ball, but if you can control a tennis ball, you can do anything. And playing on concrete, a classic example was Di Canio, Italian player, and he grew up in Rome on a council estate, and he said there was a place where they would hang the washing up, and it was these kind of wire things you hang, the mums would hang the washing on, so you couldn't kick it in the air. It was concrete, so you kept your balance because you didn't want to fall. And it was about the size of a 5v5 pitch. He said, I've never played there when it was at least 10 aside. Now, he was a player that could dribble into tight, overcrowded penalty areas. And I don't think I've seen anyone being able to do that because of that environment. It's that kind of creative thinking. And, so I think all those kind of things we miss. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you've done this, but I looked up your book on Amazon, on the internet this week, and it's no longer available. And this is probably the explanation for this. But do you know how much it is at the moment on the internet, even though it's not available?
Penny?
£162 something. I can't remember what it was.
Oh my God. I think that's, yeah, we launched it. And that was a long 15 years ago, something like that, at Waterstones in Cirencester. And I sold loads. I sold about 150 books and people coming in buying 10 and things like that. And then after that, it went into every Waterstones. But because of the title, I don't think people knew what it was. And I remember one Christmas and the guy said, Christmas sales weren't great. In fact, we didn't get any and we had one return. But yeah, so I think it was their worst selling book, but I blame the publishers for because they couldn't get Jumpers for Goalposts. Yeah, chapped legs and punctured balls wouldn't grab me particularly.
So tell me how you went from this guy, musician, you're a musician of some kind?
Yeah, I was in a band. We never had a record contract. They're called Relay, but we played Dingles and places like that in London, played a lot of London stuff. We were based I was living near Reading then. We had a big following in the kind of Reading area and Basingstoke area. And that was tough times playing live.
Right.
There's a big, during the 70s, there was a big NF following in Reading and places like that we played. So, we had some very hairy gigs. There's a lot of fighting, to be honest, a lot of scrapping, and you'd be dodging bottles as you were singing. So that's,
you like those Western things where they have the cage up and you need to protect you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing one gig, and the pub opposite the station at the time was an NF stronghold, and I don't know, a couple of them had been at a gig and were trying to, cause trouble, and they got a bit of a hiding. I mean, I'm not into violence like that, but this was the times. So we were going to play in a wine bar about 4 doors down, which was owned by an ex-CID guy. So him and 2 mates went and said, right, we're going to make sure there's no problems tonight, that people don't come from this other pub. So they went away and came back all bruised and said, no, they ain't coming back. And then through the night, these you could see infiltrating in, and we had quite a young audience, and they were all drifting away, and so I looked around and thought, yeah, we've got like 100 of the mates of the 2 guys that got a bit of a hiding in here now, and none of our supporters. So that was a hairy night.
Wow. You've had, I can think of, from what you've told me, after that time, 2 major pivots in your life, in that having children and the weirdest career change you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I mean, children, having kids, I think you kind of think, right, this is why I'm on the planet. This is why I'm here. So bringing up 2 children I really enjoyed, and they were good kids, and very different kids. So Daisy was nature, Charlie was nurture, and amazing that they work together, because they're pole, opposites. And that's the usual way with kind of, if you have 2 kids, isn't it? They're always very, very different. So
did they predominantly get on growing up? Because I know my brother and I fought like cat and dog.
Their interests were different. They got on okay, but yeah, they were very different, and also, you could see from Daisy, my daughter, that she had something from a very early age. She was kind of standing on top of the kitchen table with a Dolly Parton mask and a big foam microphone, singing along to Miss Saigon. She was about 2 at that time. So you just knew she was going to, there was, so she went into kind of one-on-one coaching, and did the kind of Lambda test, which was, I think, a good grounding, kind of Shakespeare and stuff. Then went to Stagecoach, which is, like a kids' Saturday kind of drama thing. But Charlie wasn't interested at all. But what he was very good at all the things he ever did. So he was a decent footballer, and I always left instruments around, and he picked up the guitar, and within a year was a better guitarist than I was. So, and I became the manager of the band he was in, and we went all around the country. And then he said, no, it's not improving enough. So he got rid of that. And, so he was a kind of perfectionist, but completely, you would never think that, they were so different. But, they got on and have been incredibly successful. And we always made sure.
You strike me as being quite artistic. You strike me as being, because I watched some video you did about your top 10 movies, and I thought, great, we're going to have something common here. We don't. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Certainly, that's not to say that I wouldn't enjoy those movies, but I was waiting for Star Wars or Indiana Jones or something. It was like very arty stuff, and I thought, this is interesting because that perhaps reflects in the pursuits of your kids.
Mm. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Yeah, some weren't, Zulu and things like that. There are times
Yeah,
there's a
Zulu
certain
was the one.
film at certain times. But
But
yeah,
I think that probably reflects your when it came out in your life, maybe,
yes,
rather than
yeah,
yeah.
and those kind of gritty '60s type, books. Alan Sillitoe and Saturday Night, Sunday morning, those kind of things I really, really
Yeah.
like to read. Kind of British, Um, but I was the only one that never went to university. Everyone else in my family did, and the next generation did. Um, so that was but having kids, that was just phenomenal. And then going on to have I've got 5 grandchildren at present, and that is a major thing as well. I thought that it would be one kind of run down. You wouldn't be as quite so connected, but I was completely wrong. I'm just as connected with grandchildren, I am children, because I think you see it in a different light as well. So
I
yeah,
can't
I was
wait. I can't
always,
wait to be a granddad. I'm
yeah,
desperate to be a granddad.
it's
And
brilliant.
I get the impression that I think because you're not in I mean, you're obviously in charge when they're with you, but the responsibility for their future isn't as great. So you can kind of have a link more at their level, ironically. There's that I can see anyway.
Yeah, but it's that time, trying to get my head around that time thing, and about, what will they remember of the stuff we've done. And I take one of my sons, I since the first grandchild was born, I've had one, I've had one of them for a day a week, and we go for the whole day, and we go out, we do stuff, and then when they start school, I go on to the next grandchild. And those kind of moments are really, really, really precious, but that time thing, because my granddad, he was in the First World War, and would talk about his experience in Gallipoli. And, I'm thinking, gee, he was born in 1890, I mean, it's just the kind of time is mad. And I'm thinking, gee, it will be something similar, that my grandchildren, God, remember him? And he was, he was born in, I mean, he was born in
He lived in the
1957,
60s.
Yeah, he lived through that. So time just goes. I remember my mum's Aunt Kitty, who was 107 when she died. And, you were very, she didn't die till the 80s or somewhere. She was born in 1879. That was the Zulu War. And my dad used to say, "Go on, Kitty, tell us about the siege of Mafeking, in the Boer War." She was 21 then. She said, "Don't joke, Bob.
Jesus,
I had friends there." But
that is
jeez,
incredible.
she was an old woman in the First World War. So that time of passage, I find, we haven't been around for very long at all, have we? I mean, we
No,
really
no,
haven't.
no.
And you go, so that was 1890. So that was what, 130 years ago my grandfather was born. I mean,
And then you think sharks have been around since before the dinosaurs.
yes, and before
You know,
before before trees as well, sharks.
I think
So, and what's the other one, isn't it? We are closer to T-Rexes than T-Rexes are, ones with a thing along their back.
yeah, that's right. Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it is extraordinary.
yeah. The T-Rex is closer to the iPad, I think, is the comparison, isn't it? The T-Rex is.
It's mad, So we haven't been around for that long,
No,
but
but you keep that alive to somewhat as well, don't you? Because I've seen that you are interested in the history of your area, but also your family, and you've not taken that lightly, have you?
well, I think, history. I've got more and more into history, and certainly Charlie's very into kind of history. And there's two kind of things that follow me around. One is childhood and children, you know, and I worked in a school, and I have this, you know, the football charity, and the other is history. And certainly, you know, the charity, the Children's Football Alliance, I'm a director, that combines both. And that's been massive in, you know, my life. So I've done it for 15 years now. We've only got one employee, Ernie, who does 95% of the work. And what we do there is we're trying to use football for kind of good. And it's most of it is based around the Christmas truce and those games of football, you know, between the Germans and the Allied soldiers during World War One, and there was a number, you know, because the front line is 600 miles.
Yeah.
And I find, and that's our mantra: if you can have a game of football against the enemy during a world war, anything is possible. And football's a good bridge, as is music and art. And so I'm incredibly proud of that. And now we have 82 peace pitches around the world in 6 continents. And then we find funding to bring children from those, you know, pitches to Mazines in Belgium, which is site of one of the Christmas truces, one of the games of football, and there's the Peace Village there. And that's really, really special. You know, we find funding. So the kids come over for a week. All you need to do is you twin a pitch or a playing, you know, it's mainly football, but also we've got some rugby pitches, cricket pitches, and a boxing ring as well. The boxing ring is in Belfast. On one side is a Catholic estate, the other side is a Protestant estate, and they both go to the same boxing gym. And I think
How do people help with that? How can people get involved with that?
Basically by twinning a pitch, a school pitch or whatever. And when you've twinned that, then you can apply to go to our global sports games, we call it. And that's a week in Belgium, and we stay at the brilliant Peace Village. And we normally have about 60 to 80 children. At present, there are 56 conflicts worldwide, and that's the most since the Second World War. And we have pitches in 12 of those areas, places like Kashmir, you know, on the border of Pakistan and India. And of course, there were trouble in that area. And then, I mean, the Congo, and we've just got a pitch at Auschwitz. We've got 3 pitches in Croatia, and the plan now with you know, the Croatians is that we're having a pitch in every single Balkan country that was involved in the, you know, the war in the 90s, you know, because, you know, they're using football and other things. So, for instance,
war zones.
Yeah. And we have kids. We have kids out there who from India. So last time, and it was a really interesting thing they were doing, is that they had children from a expensive private school in Delhi, and they had children from the slums in Delhi. Now, these kids don't have surnames or passports, so they wanted to integrate those, and how they did that with all the caste system and whatever, I don't know. So those kids combined came out to Belgium. You know, the kids in the slums haven't been out of the slums. You know, I mean, they live under polythene, and there they are in Belgium with kids from, you know, 20 different nations.
Wow.
And they all get on. You know, in 15 years, we've never had a problem with kids whatsoever.
Are you able to remove yourself from the scenario when you see it? Because I would imagine when you're in the position you're in, there's a lot of organization, and oh my God, we need a load of bottles of water over there. And are you able to take it in?
Yeah, because we're much more used to it now, and you see it changing every day. How there's a pattern. You know, first of all, they sit in their, you know, their countries or whatever, you know, table, and then they start to mix, and they mix more and more. and it's, I mean, the children, and they teach you a lot, really, and it's a brilliant week. And children don't need to be sporty at all. The kind of sport we do is jumpers for goalposts, football, quick cricket, touch rugby, games that would have been played in the UK during the First World War. But they also go on bike rides, one to the Christmas truce field and another to the Peace Pool, which was the site of the biggest explosion in World War One. And then they do art graffiti, and they'll mix up, so you'll be with someone, there'll be an English kid with someone from Afghanistan, or, a Romani child, or, whatever. And there's drumming workshop, there's a drama workshop, and then there's like a peace type workshop we do. Then they go to the Passchendaele Museum, First World War Museum, Tyncott, where there's 25,000 graves. And then they go to, we also attend the last post ceremony at Menin Gate. And we deliver a poppy ball. So, and I think there's a lot of people in the UK don't know what the Belgians do for us and how much, they honor, the British and British, the Commonwealth soldiers. So Menin Gate is basically all the names of the soldiers that weren't found. There's about 65,000 names there, and there's other ones at Tyncott. So since 1928, apart from the Second World War, they do the last post ceremony every day, which means closing all the roads around there. It's usually with, a band and other, stuff, and you'll get about 1,000 people a night. Sometimes there's more at weekends, 2,000 or 3,000. They've done that every single day since
Good
1928
Lord.
to honor how we help them. Absolutely extraordinary, and they're really moving, and you get a lot of old guy from British regiments and stuff like that, but people come from all over the world, and that's staggering. So those kids learn about peace. They all get on, and they learn about peace together, and they're all the same. I mean, we sometimes take special schools as well from the UK, and it adds another layer. So, I mean, a few years ago we had the special school, and the kids they really got on with was the Romani kids, who are based in the Czech Republic in an old USSR estate called the Chanov estate. And you look up that and documentaries. No running water, no electricity. But these kids,
I'm going to write it down.
Yeah, these Chanov, CHANOV, they're brilliant. And just the kids get on because they share things like football, music, different stuff. Half boys, half girls. And the Indian kids from the slums, it was interesting when they were there, because the ones from the private school were about twice their height, and it took a bit of a while for the kids. But they really got on with these older kids who were about 17 to 19, 20 from Belfast, from an estate in Belfast. So on the coach and stuff, going to the kind of museums and stuff, the kids from Belfast were teaching the slum kids Oasis song, and the kids from the slums, it was some the equivalent, what do they call
Bollywood.
it? Bollywood, song to the Irish kids. And they swap. They got friends for life, and we track to see how people do. And I always remember there was one lad from Kent. He was struggling at school, 14. The school was in special measures. There were issues at home. And he would never have the chance to go abroad. But he wasn't athletic at all. And he was struggling at school as a 14-year-old. But he really found history, and he found his great grandfather's grave. His family knew where that was. and now he lectures in history at a university. And it was
Wow.
all from that. That's the turning point for so many kids. That's their turning point.
That is
Yeah.
incredible.
Mm.
Have you ever seen the TEDx talk about the Happiness Project at Harvard?
No.
That's worth looking up. It's the longest running study of children ever to have taken place, and it goes right back to I think before what was it called when alcohol was banned in America?
Oh yeah, prohibition.
Prohibition. It
Yeah.
goes back to even before then. But I think they've interviewed these people, I think, every 10 years. And now it's gone to their children and also their partners, and there's lots of people involved. But I think they've had 2 presidents. I think, and they took 50% of them were from the slums, and
Yeah.
50% of them were from wealthy families, and they've
Yes.
followed them and followed. It's really, 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 really interesting. But it's very similar to what you're saying. Give somebody some hope. And I think I don't think it's Chris that came up with it, but Chris Evans often talks about if there's a big enough why, you'll find the how.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
and I think if you're giving those kids the why, then they'll find the how.
Yeah, absolutely. And an environment, that's creative and they can make their own decisions. Yeah, I mean, it's seeing a lot of the refugee kids who are there as well, seeing them grow. And, we had children from Russia and children from Ukraine, and some of the children's stories are extraordinary,
Must be quite difficult knowing they're going back to that.
Yeah, I mean, they generally seem to be happy. I mean, the refugee children from Belgium, obviously staying in Belgium. But we had one girl from like Sierra Leone, and she was a refugee kid, but she managed through the contacts back at home, even though she couldn't go back. She started a peace pitch. That was the first one that a child has been able to do. And the kids from the slums in India are the happiest kids I've ever seen. So they
Really.
didn't seem to have a problem going back. Yeah.
I think watching children as well who can't speak the same language, they can communicate with ease, can't they? And that's wonderful as well.
Yeah, because all the refugee children there are speaking Flemish. I never
Yeah.
quite understand Mazines, and it's only 8 miles from the French border, but and an hour and 10 minutes drive from Calais, but they all speak Flemish in that area. Then you go further inland, and they speak French, and then by the
Yeah, there's not
German
many
border.
Flemish speakers in Belgium, is there? I don't think.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Yeah. But yeah, the kids grow, and you
That
can see them, and they're a delight. They're a delight to be with, and some of them have had harrowing times. But
so
yes, just spreading that peace.
is there a web address to go to if you want to sponsor a pitch, for example, or match a pitch? Or I can't remember what you twin them.
Yeah,
How
twin
do they
them.
do that?
Yeah, best just to go on our website. So it's the Children's Football Alliance.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put that in the links anyway, but I think it's really important, and I. There's just so many of these things going on that people just don't realize are going on, and what a wonderful gift, even if it was a gift at Christmas to give somebody, I've bought you a slice of this, what a lovely thing to do.
And of course we do
Yeah.
gifts. That's the first thing they do. They bring a small gift from their country, because obviously in the First World War, the Christmas truce, they gave little gifts to each other.
Of course.
So yeah.
Oh wow, I'd love to see that. Do you film them, or is that difficult?
Yeah, it's all filmed. Yeah. So Ernie was a documentary maker, so everything is filmed. So that we've got records. So all the global peace games and stuff, it's all on there. It's all a bit higgledy-piggledy. We've got so much on there, it's quite difficult to find. But yeah, there's some brilliant stuff on there.
Must give you great pride.
Yeah, tremendous. Yeah, seeing them grow and seeing them, that they're friends, and they're now ambassadors for peace. There's so many wars going on, but they're going out there to, going back to their communities and talking about what they had and talking about peace.
Incredible. The next question for you is, how on earth did you get involved in hoarding?
A family member. Yeah. So I went to a support group. I wanted some help. Um, and Hoarding Disorders UK were running some support groups. So that's really where it started. So I was looking for a bit of a life change as well, because I was working in a school which I absolutely loved in Cirencester, Deer Park School, which is where the kids went. And I was working in the inclusion centre, for kids who were in isolation, had behavioural issues or social or emotional. And was very lucky. My boss, Mrs. Mack, who's famous in the school. Yeah, she was a terrific boss. I've had two bosses who have been outstanding, both women. So yeah, Mrs. Mack at the school, and at present Joe Cook, who's the director of Hoarding Disorders UK. So they've taught me a huge amount. And I was very lucky at the school that I had to try and engage kids that weren't engaged. So we did it through football, but also academic things. But the questions were all football related, dance, which we did with one of the drama teachers. And the most successful was, funny enough, was fishing, especially with kids with ADHD.
Wow.
And yeah, so we even had, there was one lad in the summer term, after school on a Monday, we'd go fishing in the lakes. And he had a big issue with one of the teachers. They just didn't get on. So I got the teacher to go down, and he taught her how to fish. And she caught this big carp, and he was telling, what do I do? What do I do? It just doesn't matter. He wasn't panicked, and he was just very calm, and his voice was calming, and told her what to do and whatever. And I said, what do you think of his teaching skills? He said, he's good. He's very, all that stuff was amazing.
Nice.
And then the kids came back, and I was getting paid, I think, $9,000 a year for that, because you don't get paid in the holidays. So I thought, kids are back. It's 4 adults. I better go and earn some money. So I went, I used to be in sales, which I was terrible at, absolutely ridiculously bad. And the only people that would get me was recruitment. And that, and very nice people, and really good that they, but I just, I was quite stressed with the job. I'm not saying that gave me the heart. There was other things going on as well. And I had a heart attack. So, 3 stents fitted. And because at the time the kids were working on stuff, but not really getting paid, and my wife wasn't able to work at that juncture, I had to go back after 6 weeks of that. So, and then my son-in-law gave me some work, landscape gardening work, and I started doing bits, with Hoarding Disorders UK, just 1 day a week, and then it went to 3 days a week. And then,
And what does that entail?
well, it's changed. I mean, I've always been self-employed working with them. And first it was really going into people's homes and working with them, person-centered approach, and then, and then we started doing training as well. So, I'm an OAP now, so I stopped working in people's homes, and was working in, delivering training to, social workers, environmental health, NHS, fire services, so doing it that way. And it's fascinating hoarding. Everyone's so interested, if you ever at a dinner party, not that I ever go there, there's the top footballer being ignored, and the musician number one, because they've heard you work with people with hoarding behaviors. What,
Yeah.
So because they don't understand it,
They genuinely are. Of the days of work I've had over the last 21 years that I've been doing that element of work, those days are, or they're not usually a day, they're usually quite a number of days, but they are some of the most interesting and enlightening and heartwarming and challenging days that you can I mean, what I think it's probably right that we do talk about it a little bit here,
Yeah, yeah.
because the thing that annoys me with those cases is people just instantly write people off when they know nothing about the scenario. And it only takes 5 minutes, I would say, with a person who is in those scenarios to, I would say, change the opinions of someone who's already formed an opinion.
Yeah.
Because they're generally interesting people, but there's always an element of trauma, isn't there, that's done something that's caused these issues.
Yeah, and it's just their go-to behavior. Some people will hoard, when there's trauma or whatever. Some will turn to alcohol, some will have, eating disorders or whatever it is. But yeah. And of course hoarding is the only kind of, physical disorder you can actually see. And it starts early, the statistics I think are around about 13. And it's not a lifestyle choice, but there's some things we do see that there are some people's, their careers, you can sometimes, the people we see the most are engineers. Anything with a plug, oh, that's interesting. Oh, how does this work? Let's keep that. Second is teachers.
Yeah.
And I think that is because, this will look good for class 8 and this will good, and then artists. And, that's my family member was an artist. But, that's just on a kind of career thing. It's, but there's so much of it. I think we're talking probably about 5% of the population, which is 3 or 4 million people. So there's two things I think one is understanding the situation and working through therapy or so, because I think clearing cleans, I think the statistic is 97% don't work without therapeutic input. Yeah, that's huge. And very much now, I know sometimes you have to go and, with environmental health, you have to clear because of, virus disease and things like that. But it's fascinating and getting to know, because there's no real qualification for someone to go into a hoarded property. And it's fairly new in terms of, people have been hoarding for generations, but there is, a couple of things there. House sizes are so small. So I looked at, during lockdown, and new builds from 1920s got bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the 70s, they were at their biggest, those big council houses with huge front and back gardens, high ceilings, and then it got smaller and smaller. So now in 2020s, they're smaller than they were 100 years ago. And we have very little room and a lot more stuff. And the statistic that is mind-blowing is the UK has half of Western Europe's storage facilities, 4 times more than France and 9 times more than Germany. What are they doing in Germany? Bigger houses. I know they have big basements. Is society a bit close? And it's a fascinating subject of why people have and where they get to, but people don't understand it, and I think they just say, and the family will come in and they'll clear and they'll stack stuff and they'll go, haven't we done a good job? And there's someone having a complete, the trauma is happening all over again, but it's about loss.
People just don't understand, and I think this is professionals as well as the general public do not understand that a person's attachment to something that you can't understand why, you don't try to understand why, but a person's attachment to something that you might think is disgusting, never mind not worth keeping, is like that of a pet or a family member or something that if you were to take it away, you would be destroyed. And these people have a house full of them. And, like you said, just to go in and obliterate that by taking it all away is enough to, well, it regularly does finish people off,
Yeah, oh yeah. Mm.
and the judgment, I don't really like judgment in any form. I don't think we should be going around judging people really, where it's very difficult. I think it's a human nature, but I think if you can be aware of it and avoid it, but that to understand just that fact, even if you don't, or you're not on board with it, if you just believe it because we've told you, um, I think it puts a lot of things in context. But when I was a kid, it was the witch that lived down the street that you didn't want your ball to go in the garden of, or the grumpy old man, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. But they were just lonely people who didn't necessarily have anybody. And I think I grew up in a world where people did look in on each other, and people did walk down the street and notice that Mrs. Miggins's hedge was overgrown, and you'd offer. People don't even walk down the street now. They get in the car, they go to work, they get in the car, they go to the supermarket, so they don't even notice, never mind bump into people. And I think that judgmental element comes in. Oh, well, that makes my house look awful, how overgrown that is. But it's just so much more heart and soul to it than that. And you only have to spend like I say, 5 minutes talking to somebody to realize that the despair that it causes them is just as great um, as anything you can experience. The despair is on both sides. The despair is how they're living, but also it's, if you were to take it away, they will be in despair as well. And it's just an impossible scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's you're being traumatized again, and hoarding is, yeah, it's about filling a void, and it's about loss of a loved one, loss of a marriage, loss of a job, loss of kids in terms of empty nest syndrome. So you fill that space up with stuff. So often, if you're a couple, or and you share the same bed, the first part that goes is the other side of the bed, and then maybe probably the bedroom. And if you clear it, it's the same as, people clear it, that's it, we've done it, woo, haven't we done well, tick. It's the same about going into maybe someone's house who has alcohol issues, finding all the bottles in the house and pouring it down the sink and go, tick, sorted. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
so it has to be done slowly because it's built up slowly, and a kind of person-centered approach. But it's about control. So if the client doesn't have control about what stays, what goes, etc., it's not going to work. And family members, are distraught. They don't know what to do. They don't. And the classic one is, they'll come in and they'll tidy and they'll throw stuff away they think is, no good, or they won't be needed. And at first, their family member kind of thanks, oh, it's lovely. And then about a week later, they ring up, I can't find this thing, I can't find that. And people, knock back family and friends. So we've even gone to the kind of stage of, we've now got a separate support group just for family and friends. And it's very emotional, I mean, people, are often in tears. They don't know what to do. And as well as that, we also do, and I think this is the first kind of thing, the support groups, for people with hoarding behaviors. And we do one face to face, we do a phone in one, and we do a one on Teams. And I think that brings down the shame and embarrassment, and that's the first kind of rung on the ladder, and then maybe therapy and stuff. And also, we're always thinking about harm reduction, because obviously fire and trip, slips and hazards, are big. Where I live here, a few Christmases ago, someone with hoarding behaviors died in a fire. And a few months ago, we were doing the Teams support group, and there was someone new on there. And it was a lady who had hoarding behaviors and her grown-up daughter. And when they introduced themselves, they said, "We're here today because 6 days ago I took my mum out for the evening. And when we came back, the house was on fire with my father inside who died." Oh, right. So we're talking about, fires, very different in hoarded homes. And we think about 35% of fire deaths are hoarding related, which is big when you consider it's about 4 or 5% of people with hoarding behaviors in the country. And, working with the fire services, safe and well visits and things, they're magnificent. They do, they are proactive, and about avoiding, and the amount of call outs has been drastically reduced because of that. So I think we're very lucky in that, that term, that the fire services and people like that. Whereas, we did some training in Ireland recently and they don't have safe and well visits. It's more a reactive thing.
But people don't realize how big that is as well, because one of the things, I mean, you mentioned shame, and that's a big driver for pushing people away in the first place, so people don't actually get through the door and notice that the problem is, because there's a bit like with alcoholism, as you mentioned it, there's a level of deceit that goes with it in order for them to get into that situation, if they have other people in their lives, and often they don't.
Yeah.
But the fire brigade are generally trusted by most people, whereas the council or someone or social services, all of those people come with a level of threat, whereas the fire services generally don't, do they? So they allow people in. But for the fire service, something that people often don't realize is one of the reasons they need to know is because if there is a fire, they need to know the state of the house in order to know that they have to send probably 2 extra tenders, maybe 10 more men, and also to know that they may not even go in to put it out because of the risk to life to the fire service.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize those things.
Yeah. And also things like, where are they sleeping? Because very often they're not sleeping upstairs, they're sleeping downstairs. So if we know where they are, that will be a lot easier,
Absolutely.
So it's very much about, a kind of multi-agency type approach, and keeping people on radar, because people will clear and then go, great, tick. And then they come back 6 months later and it's worse. The hoarding is worse because it's not being dealt with. There's a lady called Cherry Rudge, Rainbow Red and So, and she's come up with this brilliant icebreaker form, which is a form to take to the doctor or medical professional to have a conversation about your hoarding. And there's also info there for the medical profession as well, because very often they don't know much about it. But since 2018, it's been recognized, by the World Health Organization, and the NHS take their, lead from that. But the big thing
That's been massive.
Yeah, huge.
That's been huge, hasn't it?
But the big news is last week, hoarding was discussed in the House of Commons. So there is now a steering committee with all the people from the hoarding world on it. So it's very collaborative. And they're all fairly small organizations as well. So there's a steering committee, and they're going to Parliament in January to meet up with MPs, etc. And it takes that, I guess, probably, it's about 15 years we've had some, Cloud's End, ourselves at Hoarding Disorders UK, Hoarding UK, Holistic Hoarding in Wales, and we all talk, we all know each other, and we meet up during the year, and those people with some academics who are studying at university, they're part of this panel. So I think things are moving forward. Interestingly, Cook, who is the director at Hoarding Disorders, she and another colleague who's since left, about 3 years ago, they were asked to go to the Czech Republic to do some training, because at present it's the police that deal with hoarding.
Wow.
So, I mean, they may be doing a great job, I don't know, but It's a
No,
bit different from here. Yeah,
yeah,
and
certainly.
we've seen a lot of big strides. I think things are starting to, and I've been there nearly 10 years now, and the difference is huge. And I think people are taking on board councils and housing associations that they have kind of hoarding czars and people that will, I've seen a lot of good work. One in particular, Swindon Borough Council, we did some training a few years ago, and um, and they've done an incredible job. So they started a support group. They got some funding, and they employed 3 declutterers, a social worker just dealing with people with hoarding behaviours, and a part-time therapist. So these things are huge, huge changes.
I think there's from an outsider looking in point of view, you might look at that and think, well, what a waste of money. But actually, these things are so expensive to local authorities. And I started my job 21 years ago, and we'd get one of these cases a year. It would come up few and far between. Now we're getting 2, 3, 4 a month, and the cost to local authorities is just colossal. So if it can be managed and managed out or supported or worked with in some way, it's got to be better. That's just looking at it at a fiscal level, never mind the emotional and the psychological approach
Yeah,
being much better to do it that way.
yeah. There's a huge clamor really that and that financially it makes sense not just to do it, to spend a bit more time and a more of a holistic person-centered approach. I remember a colleague of mine was working with someone and they'd had 4 clear and cleans. I mean, how much is that? So it's not working,
Well,
so
no.
a different approach went a lot better.
It's interesting as well that some of it's city based, so but where I work is very, very rural. I mean, it's 1,000 square miles of rural with a few towns in it. And when you come across those big ones like the farms or the country sort of buildings, I mean it's 2 weeks work, and that's just clearing. That's not even thinking about the
Yeah,
restorative work that you're going to
yeah.
do before and after.
It's huge, and I think things like lockdown didn't help at all.
No.
And I think the other thing is accelerating is that people change their shopping habits and now buy
Uh,
online. At least when you
uh,
were going out shopping, you might you might be ill, your mobility might not be great, it might be pouring with rain, there might be a bus strike, and not all shops open 24/7. But when you order online, you press the button and it comes the next day, and you can wake up at 2 o'clock and you're not really thinking, and it's so much easier, and it's like a present coming through the post. So that has changed a lot of things.
and I think if you're lonely, it's someone coming to your home. That's the other thing. It's a delivery driver coming to say hello, Mrs. Miggins.
Yeah, so I would say through about I was probably going to people's homes for about 8 years. I would have said that 90% of the people I work with live alone.
Uh,
Uh, so that social isolation is going to get worse and worse. But what I would say, this is an extraordinary country in terms of, little charities and trusts and,
uh,
people volunteering is amazing. There are so many voluntary organizations and stuff, gardening projects. And, I know one in Manchester with Tight Lines, which is a fishing project. They're doing incredible work, so virtually every single hobby there's some kind of mental health type charity linked to it that you can go to
uh,
and do. So I think that weirdly, I think it's, this idea of the big society and you go out and help.
uh,
It's
uh,
kind of worked
uh.
because there's so many
And
people say, well, the government aren't doing anything. We've got to do something. And
Yeah, I
I
think
think,
you're right, though. I think a lot of that came out of lockdown when people had a lot of thinking time. A lot of people thought that this problem is becoming gargantuan in this scenario. It was a small one at the beginning, but now everyone's thinking about it. Interestingly, the shared colleague that you and I have, I'm attending a meeting with her with our local authority next week, which is about engaging with the local charitable involvement, and also small businesses. Because when you've got something like a gas boiler that needs fixing, the big guns, they turn up to the door and just say, "I'm not going in there."
yeah,
Whereas your local guy might be a little bit more expensive, but he's probably a bit more caring about the person in there as well.
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And I think, it's one of the things we're doing now as well is we're looking, we did one is training the operatives and people like the gas companies and stuff about how to deal with, and it's all about, the language you use and, not being judgmental, because this is not a lifestyle choice. This is a mental health disorder. So, getting those people, and very often those are the people that see the property first and maybe raise, so that they know the clutter image rating,
Yeah.
which, by the way, everyone is a kind of universal thing about how much items are in a property. So yeah, I think things are moving really quickly on that front.
When I've dealt with these cases, it's the people that I had the least expectation to be tolerant of it are actually 9 times out of 10 the best people to go in and it's the most unlikely relationships you expect to form that form, isn't it? When you like you say, the gas man going in, some of those guys are just amazing naturally at breaking down those barriers and making those people feel comfortable, aren't they?
Yeah, and they can be that kind of trusted person that lets other people in that might be able to help. So I think that's huge. Yeah, and definitely I know by far the most challenging hoarding scenario I ever had a fantastic outcome, and ones you think, oh, this won't
Mm,
take long, have been a nightmare. So it's
yeah,
funny, but it's looking around, about who else can help, who can be. It takes a village is our kind of mantra.
absolutely,
It's not just
absolutely.
one person's. It's all of our responsibility to help people.
Finally, and it's probably the thing you're most sick of talking about, but and but I am intrigued. Tell me about this country. I mean, I know probably more than the average person, but most of your family works on that, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, incredible how it came about. But there were two. There were a couple of things that actually helped it on the way. One was that in around about 2008, we lost everything. I was in sales. We had a 5-bedroom house, and through bad, I put my hand out, bad finances on my part, and also I was in electronics, and everything's went to China and other places. And they had the 2008 crash. We lost our house and ended up in a 2 up, 2 down on an estate, rented property. I'm still there. Everyone else has managed to move on. But I think, and there were 4 adults in a 2 up, 2 down. But I think if that hadn't happened, this country wouldn't have been written. And also, the kids were, first of all, signed up by Universal and ITV, and it took 4 years to create a pilot, which was so watered down in the end because there were so many. Oh, you can't do it that way. You can't do it that way, and
Mm.
ITV said this isn't what we signed up for. But that 4 years, the resilience they built up, and I said, don't fail with someone else's work. So, they were let go by Universal, and Daisy sent a funny email to Shane Allen, who was head of comedy at BBC at the time, and he said, "Right, let's go straight to series." Charlie was never ever going to be in it. The most unlikely person ever to act or write, and there he was. Because
More
Daisy
than
was,
you.
oh yeah, because I'm a massive show off. I love acting. I've been
Okay,
on stage, remember, in a band in the 70s.
right. Okay.
Dodging all those cans from the National Front. And then yeah, so, but he, because of circumstances, he was up with Daisy in London. She was having a bad time at RADA. She wasn't enjoying it. And really from there, it was the Colonel. They went up. We had no money, so they couldn't go out. And they just started talking about people in Cirencester and local characters. And it built slowly from there. But from that first idea, and Daisy's doing this little thing, Kerry's got a new camera and had the mother off thing. It took 8.5 years from there to get onto TV.
Jesus.
So it's an overnight sensation that's taken 8.5 years. Yeah.
But that does go back to what you were saying, how there's an argument to suggest that that is an example of punk rock working, but it's through just not giving up and presumably being very good.
Yeah, and I think when you're down there, you've got nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I always remember Michael Ballantyne, I think his name is. He's one of the original
Dragons.
dragons, and I read his book, and he said all us entrepreneurs were rubbish at school, so he left at 14. That went in his era, and we had about 10 years on anyone that was going up to university, and we had nothing to lose. So
Yeah.
we tried stuff, trial and error, and you get there. All the entrepreneurs are, though from that era got there, and I think there was a bit of that with this. We just said, well, as long as you work, do your 40 hours a day at creating something, do it. And I think the other thing that helped was just praise. There's not enough praise, and people with hoarding paper probably never have heard of it, never heard at school that. And you go in and you say, gosh, you've done really well. And, you're, and this is a specific thing you're good at. It was always taught me at school when I, started work, they said you can make or destroy a child's life with one sentence, and it's true, unfortunately,
It is.
So that's really, and talk about chalk and cheese, Daisy's nature and Charlie's nurture, completely end of the spectrums in. But Charlie's very first acting appointment, other than singing a verse of Grandfather's Clock at primary school, was Scarecrow Festival. That's the first time he's ever acted. Didn't do it at school.
And he's the lead in that episode.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talk about jumping in the deep end. Whereas my brother, he's been a professional actor for 40 odd years and was in Gangs of New York. And they were on TV the other day, Reese Witherspoon. Oh, I remember Trevor. Yeah. And they were in a period drama together.
Wow.
So yeah, so having 4 Coopers on it was extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another one of our family. Do you know Ghosts? Have you ever seen Ghosts?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. He's also horrible histories, and he's Dino in the Welsh one. I can't remember what it's called. Gavin and Stacey. Matt Bainton. Yeah, and he's very well known. He's, my mum was a Bainton, so Matt Bainton. He a comedy writer and and performer. So my children and him share the same great grandfather, the one that was in the First World War, who I watched the 1966 World Cup final with. He taught me how to kick a ball. He taught me how to hold a bat. Taught me how to bowl.
I mean, because Martin Mucklowe is a pretty horrific person, and you are absolutely the antithesis of that. That must make it much more fun to play.
Oh yeah, I mean, playing a baddie is absolutely brilliant. I think it's very easy as well, much easier. Yeah, the Independent said I was the nastiest man on TV. So
It breaks my heart.
Yeah,
I find it heartbreaking the way all she wants is his love, and it just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be a little bit too close to home for me, but yeah, it kills me, especially when Kerry, certainly early on in that series, isn't desperately likable, but you see the true child in her there. I mean, the writing of that for must be. I mean, the pride you must have, because even it's like no makeup is supposedly harder than makeup, and acting real must be hard. I'd love a go, but yeah, that can't be easy.
Yeah, no, I struggle with lines as I get older. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, what a character the kids had written. I mean, I wasn't really going to be doing anything. It was fairly late on, and Daisy said, "Well, why don't you do a do a screen to be my dad? We look a bit like each other, but And, so I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. And I said, but what about the voice? What accent or what? And they said, go on YouTube and listen to the Fred West police interviews. So he's got this quite calm voice, but saying these, horrendous things. But all that stuff, he's done some iffy thing. You talk to builders in Gloucestershire. They'll say what a good builder he is.
And he could carry 4x4s.
Yeah. And I was in a garage in Cirencester, and there was a guy in front of me, I was waiting to MOT and stuff, and he was talking. He said, I used to run a builder's merchant in Gloucester. And he said, my best customer. Guess who my best customer is?
Oh,
and he
God.
said, always paid his bills on time, absolute gentleman, Fred West. And you just think. But weirdly, I used to live in North Devon, and I was living in the same village as where Rose West was born. So we were there at the same kind of time. I don't remember her, but yeah.
Awful. And you met Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, I met Charlie Chaplin. Now there's
how did you recognise him?
He was doing this with a stick. No, it was on a family holiday, and I've only kind of thought about it in the last year or so about how significant that was, because he's got to be probably from that century one of the top 3 people, I would have said. I mean, it's just
he must be one of the most famous people of all time.
Yeah. So
we're there with Elvis.
Yeah, absolutely. 1967, I think it was. We were on a holiday I was 10, in Italy. And I think we went over the border, Lake Veve, I think it was called. And there was a wine festival there, and because he'd gone over there to live. And he was with a much younger wife, Una, I think her name was. And I just said, "Oh, hello, Charlie." I think I got his autograph. I don't know where that is. It's on some napkin. Obviously, he was a elderly man by then. But yeah, that's
he was quite a handsome chap as well, wasn't he? He was quite dashing looking.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't look it. Yeah.
And of course, was born in England. Everyone thinks he's American, but was born in England. Yeah.
No, very much so. It's like I never know which of the
thin one. Yeah.
The thin one. Yeah.
Stan Laurel
from Yorkshire.
Yeah. Stan Laurel. Yeah.
Yeah. But you also played cricket with Ernie Wise.
Yeah, he wasn't very happy about this. Yeah, it's in the 70s, and it was a charity thing that they used to come and play a lot of teams, like the kind of Lord's Taverners type thing. And it was, I used to live near Reading, and I played cricket for the local team. So I was asked to play for this team against celebrities. And I think I was in the toilet when the chap came in and said Ernie Wise has got to make at least 50 runs. And he comes out with a huge bat, like a comic thing to put in front of the stumps. And he got about 12 and he dollied up a catch and I caught it. Yay! Because it's not often you're going to catch Ernie Wise. And he kind of walked, everyone's staring at me, and he was walking off just daggers at me the whole way. The catcher rang and said, he's meant to be making 50. What are you doing? Why did you catch him? I said, I was in the loo. I didn't know. So I just think that Ernie Wise, all those years later, was just kind of like cursing this kid in,
It was his day that day.
Yeah.
So you did briefly mention your heart attack. Do you think that gave you a different outlook on life?
Yeah, in that I don't fear death at all. When it comes, it comes. But yeah, I feel I'm lucky. But I don't, it hasn't stopped me in anything. And I think we are very lucky. In fact, my father, my brother, myself, and my three male cousins, all had heart attacks in their 50s, which is extraordinary, really. But, my father, lived to 90. So hopefully, once they catch you, then they could do something about it with medication and, yearly checks and whatever. So it hasn't really stopped.
Well, they say stents. If you get stents put in, you're as good as new almost, aren't
Yeah,
they?
so I had 3. Yeah, and my brother recently had his 15-year check. They said, no, the stents are fine, But I had this, but the thing I would say is that it's never this, gripping the heart or ever. It's, with me, it was my neck. So I woke about 4:00 with this weird sensation in my neck and I thought, and I thought it was something to do with gland, and then after about 20 minutes, I went back to sleep, and then I was walking to work. So it was on a Sunday. I was walking to work about 2 or 3 miles at the time. And as soon as I started walking, I got this pain. I put it down to indigestion. I was already on a statin because of, the fact I just didn't think. And in fact, I played a bit of football. And my mate always goes on, yeah, you're the only person I know who's tried to run off a heart attack. So by the Friday, I was saying, this walking is ridiculous. So I went and saw the doctor and immediately said, right, hospital. And he twigged it. And, so I stayed in there for a week, had 3 stents. But I've never had any twinges. And I think there are things to look out. I think, especially for men, it's never seems to be talked about, is if you have trouble downstairs, erectile dysfunction, it's probably your heart. It's not, psychological. Really? I can't, oh dear. It's probably because it's a mechanical thing. There's not blood going down there. So I think they ought to use that a bit more. I mean, I don't,
Yeah, they should.
So
it's funny. I had a guest on 2 or 3 episodes ago, a guy who went for a PSA check for his prostate in 2018. He came back absolutely fine, no problem. 3 or 4 years later, he went for another one, and he was stage 4 cancer, and it had metastasized to his spine, and he's got terminal cancer now, and he has a podcast where he basically spreads the word. So he speaks to cancer survivors, but he spoke to me because on mental health, because they're all interlinked. It must affect you if you know those difficult times to go through. But one of the things he has done, I'm 46, and I did it this week, actually. I've been trying to get a PSA check because I promised him I would. And I couldn't get one through the doctor because I'm too young and I don't have any symptoms. So you can buy it. I didn't realize, you might already know, but you can get them on Amazon. So they're 10 quid for 2.
Yeah.
And it's just a finger prick, and you drop the blood on like you did the COVID test with the thing that you put in your throat, and you just drop the blood on it and it gives you a result in a short time. But the beauty of it for me was there was 2. So I got to give the other one to someone I love. And
Yeah.
actually, this Christmas, you can buy a pack of 5 for 20 quid. I'm going to go
Yeah.
and buy, maybe 3 or 4 sets of those. And just the Christmas gifts I'm giving out are going to be to the men in my life that I love, on the instruction that they have to send me a photograph that they've done it. Because at first I thought, well, if it's bad, I'll feel terrible. But actually, no, if it's bad, I'll feel amazing, because it's the first chance of them getting some help, because caught early, a bit like the heart, it's got to be done. But we men are just so bad at talking about our health.
Yeah, extremely bad. And isn't it? Suicide is the biggest killer. Men under 50,
Men and women under 50. Yeah,
it's extraordinary. Yeah, just women. Most women have heart attacks between their shoulder blades. That's where they feel the pain. It's not
that's
here
interesting.
between their shoulder blades.
I've
Very
never
often.
heard that before.
Yeah,
That's really important to know. Last question, and it's a quick one. What's your favourite pie?
Probably steak and kidney, traditional. Yeah,
That's simple.
Yeah,
that is impressive. You see, you only get sweet ones from the Americans, and they just don't know what they're missing. They do not know what.
Well,
they're
what's
missing.
yours, Mark? What's your favourite pie?
Oh, see, that's different. I am the pie eating man, so if it's got pastry on the side, I thought you might be a pasty, being from Devon, because there's a little bit of a war between the Cornish and the. What are you if you're from Devon?
Devon dumpling, I guess. Devon down there at the bay.
Yeah, I thought because the pasties are different as well.
The big, oggies or something. Now the big one is the scones. You know how you put the cream and jam.
I'm not even going there.
Yeah,
I'm not going there. That is a danger zone to be talking about. Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on Chewing the Crust. It's been very good of you. I hope we've kind of covered everything. I didn't think we'd get there, but we have. We've done it.
Well, thank you, Mark. Yeah, much appreciated.
You're welcome, and fingers crossed. Maybe our paths will cross in an untidy house somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Hopefully we'll catch up again. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye. That was Paul Cooper, and what a cracking chat that was. From hoarding to Hollywood, or at least North Leach. His story is proof that life doesn't follow a straight line. What I love most about Paul is that he's built a life on encouragement and positivity, whether it's been helping somebody dig out from under clutter or cheering on a child in a peace pitch halfway across the world. He leads with kindness and curiosity. On a peace pitch. What I love most about Paul is that he's built a life of encouragement and positivity, whether it's helping somebody dig out from under all that clutter or cheering on a child on a peace pitch halfway across the world. He leads with kindness and curiosity. And that line he said, you can make or destroy a child with one word. That will stay with me, I think. It's a reminder that encouragement costs nothing, but can change everything. Paul, thank you for sharing your heart, your humour, your wisdom, and the rest with us, and for reminding us that we can all start again or change direction at any age. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take 2 seconds to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. It helps more than you think. If you're ready for more stories, laughs, and real talk about what it means to keep your head together, pick up my book, The Pie Eating Man's Guide to a Healthy Mind, available now on Amazon. So it just leaves me to say, look after yourselves and look after each other, and we shall see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.